even for me, I don't like really working by myself. I love, because my forte is really on the keyboards and on the synths and sound design. So for me, I love pairing up with somebody who does really good drum programming and crazy drums, and like it speeds up the process. It makes it more fun. And I think that's sort of what people are on. But if you have something special and you're like, yeah, I don't want anyone to touch this is my baby, then yeah, work on it for however long it takes, and don't be discouraged by taking a long time, because over time you're going to improve and you're going to be able to write and produce and do all that much faster. But establish the connection with some good producers, find someone who's good at mixing or trying to get good at mixing. It doesn't have to be like the dopest mixer or producer in the world. The people that are up and coming, you never know, they could be the next, Timbaland or Max Martin or whatever. You just never know. So I think just work with the people that you believe in and work with the people who believe in you.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Music Business. I am your host, Ari Herstand, author of How to Make It in the New Music Business, the book. Today's episode was a live podcast episode. We brought in Ari's Take Academy students who were able to attend live and then ask questions at the end. It was a very interesting conversation. My guests today are Rogét Chahayed. He is a Grammy-nominated producer and songwriter whose songs have sold over 30 million copies. He's worked with some of the biggest names in the business. He did Halsey's Bad at Love. He worked on Travis Scott's Sicko Mode. He did Miguel Skywalker. He's worked with Drake. He's worked with G-Eazy, Kehlani, Kesha, Calvin Harris, Carly Rae Jepsen. The list goes on and on and on and on. We also have on the show his manager, Greg Katz. We got into both sides of it. We got primarily we're talking about the business of being a hit producer and songwriter and how splits work, what producer points mean, how songwriting credit gets broken up, publishing, how to get a publishing deal, what to look for in the pub deals. And Rogét gives some really great advice to aspiring songwriters and producers on how to get started and how to really get going. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or YouTube, please leave a comment and a review. Those really help. Sign up for the email list. You can go to aristake.com and you'll get notified every time we release an episode. As always, please find me on Instagram or Twitter at Ari Herstand or at Ari's Take to find the show. All right, well, let's kick into the show. Rogét, Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Nice intro too. Thank you.
Rogét, I want to start with you. You went to the San Francisco Conservatory of Music studying, I'm assuming, piano performance. Is that right?
That's correct.
How do you go from that? Now, I went to the University of Minnesota studying classical trumpet. I don't know if the San Francisco Conservatory is similar to that music program, but it was pretty strictly classical. Like I was doing my etudes, all of that. To take jazz trumpet lessons, I had to take a 45-minute bus ride across town to go take from Dave Jensen, Prince's trumpet player, because they didn't even have a jazz program at Minnesota. They didn't have anything. They offered no jazz there. So I literally had to go and pay somebody else, also paying my, outside of my student fees. How do you go from studying classical piano to working with, I think Dr. Dre was like your mentor early on, and then now being, a producer of all these number one hits? Give us a little background on that.
Well, I didn't know it was going to happen. So that's kind of one thing. You just, for me, I think it was in high school. I really started taking music more seriously, but especially classical music. And I think it was my junior year of high school. I decided, hey, I learned this piece, the Chopin Ballade No. 1 in G minor, and I was like, I love this piece. I want to learn it. I just feel like I could do it. And once I did, I kind of, gave me the confidence to say, hey, maybe you could actually pursue this and like really go all the way. So I did some auditions at several different places: Juilliard, Manhattan School of Music, San Francisco Conservatory, and ended up going to San Fran. And it was interesting because, kind of like your situation, there wasn't a jazz program there as well, but I loved jazz. And while I was at school, while I was at the conservatory, I sort of got deeper and into listening to more hip hop and more rap. I had friends that were just into that, and we were all, I always loved rap, but it kind of, I was able to listen more to the details of songs and musicality, especially since you're studying music. You're like, wondering what makes songs so interesting. And I kind of discovered Scott Storch during that time, who's like one of my all-time favorites, and realized he was the guy behind most of these songs. He was the driving force with the keys. And I said, I want to do that. I want to do what he's doing. And I think when I finished college, I came back to LA and I started getting into making beats and working on the computer, synthesizers.
What program were you using then?
I actually started with Logic, and I'm still on Logic to this day.
No shit.
I am, yeah. I love it.
All right. Cool, cool.
Yeah, so it kind of was interesting because the shift really went from being a classical pianist to getting really into jazz, and then getting really into hip hop and production in general, just songwriting and production. But hip hop's like, it's like my passion. It's like my favorite. And
cool. So when you were in school, you weren't really making beats or anything like that. You kind of were just listening to hip hop, doing your research, but you were focused on your classical piano studies for the most part.
Yeah, I wasn't making beats during college, but since it wasn't so far from LA, which is where I live and where I'm from, I would fly back often, and I was in a few bands. So I started a few groups that had sort of like an MC, a singer, and keys, guitar, drums, bass, and I was kind of the MD. So I was just really passionate about doing that and performing and making songs, making ideas. I didn't really know how to make a beat. I would kind of mess around on GarageBand but I just didn't really figure it out until afterwards.
Okay. Yeah. So you finished school, you came back to LA, then you started making beats. Did you have a friend that was like, hey, let me show you Logic? Or was this like a YouTube tutorial? This is a YouTube conservatory now.
I actually wasn't so heavy into YouTube, I think then was just kind of still like, there wasn't as much information then as there is now, obviously. So I really had some close friends that had studios, and I also have a friend of mine, one of my closest friends, his dad was a pretty big like rock producer, and he does a lot of stuff for like Bruce Springsteen and things like that. But he put me into a lot of sessions and kind of showed me the ropes a little bit. So I had a little bit of guidance from some friends. I picked up little bits of knowledge here and there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So let's cut to, the earliest kind of, would you say you had a big break, or were you hustling, or like, how do you get started kind of working with artists? I mean, what was your first production?
Well, I have been working for a while. I'd say probably since doing sessions and things like that heavily since about 2012, 2013. Okay. And I was hustling. I was teaching piano. Excuse me. I was teaching piano. I was playing jazz gigs. I was doing it all just to stay, alive and make money and do all that. But in the midst of all that, I was showing up to the studio. I was connecting with different people, and also playing a lot too, just doing a lot of shows and kind of being a hired gun. Anything I could do that had music involved, or piano or keys or whatever, I was there.
Cool.
I would say that my first real production and actual placement was Broccoli in 2016.
No shit.
My first official one.
Lil Yachty. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a first production. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how did that come to be? How do you meet Drum? How does that happen?
Well, actually around that time was when I met Greg, and it was about 2015, and he had connected me to, he linked me up with some really cool producers and artists to work with, just to sort of get started. And he linked me up with a friend who I still collaborate with a lot and consider a very dear friend. His name is Ahmad Royal, really, really amazing producer, songwriter, and artist. He was working with Drum at at Rick Rubin's studio, Shangri-La in Malibu. And one day he just called me randomly and was like, "Hey, you want to come over to Rick Rubin's studio?" And I was like, yeah, I left. I was probably teaching a lesson and I kind of just left early, picked up my keyboard, headed over there. And I had no idea what was going on, but I was just in a big room playing keys and jamming with other musicians. And then I saw Drum walk in and I was like, oh, I know this guy. I know who he is. And we kind of became instant friends. We had like a 2-hour jam session and just, we really took a liking to each other's style and we just became close. Yeah.
Nice. And were you I'm curious about, so I want to come back to this story, but I want to bring Greg in because you mentioned Greg and you knew him at the time. So Greg, what's going on? How you doing? It's been a minute that you've been sitting there.
Hey, I'm chilling. Rogét's got the cool stories. I just send the emails.
He's a part of them.
He's a part of it, right? So I'm curious though, at that time that Rogét was just talking about, were you guys officially working together? What was your involvement? What is the relationship like between the two of you? And it's like, it's a management thing. And I want to kind of get into what that actually means when you're managing a producer songwriter. Cause I don't think that is as widely known as what kind of an artist manager does. But kind of take me back to that era, just right around the Broccoli time and how the relationship kind of got started, managing Rogét.
Yeah, totally. So we started working together officially in like the middle of 2015. And sort of the way it came together was we were acquainted and I was closer friends anyway, with a couple of great musician producers that are close friends with Rogét, Wes Singerman, Taylor Dexter. We all still work together. And Wes and Rogét had done some stuff on records where they were credited as musicians, but what was really going on was they were producing the records and it was just, other people were being credit hogs.
And when you're talking about records at the time, like what's level records? Are we talking about like DIY indie records with less than 1,000 streams on Spotify records? Or are we talking records that got like, charted, radio play, millions of streams kind of thing?
Yeah. Big hip hop records where they were, where they were being I would say, to be politically correct, being undercredited. And
that's a euphemism if I ever heard one. Okay.
And so they had come to me and were like, Wes and Taylor and we'd been friends for a while. Rogét and I were kind of acquaintances. But they all came to me. We got lunch at a falafel place and they were like, we're doing this stuff on at sort of a pretty high level and we need somebody that we kind of like and trust, who we don't think is going to steal stuff from us, to kind of like, help us get the business right on these, increasingly big projects that we're working on.
Yeah.
And, I'd been doing like the indie company A&R hustle and I had managed another producer. And so, I kind of knew the ropes already. And, and so once we got started, it was just like producer, writer, development basics of just putting them in sessions, introducing them to new collaborators, stuff like that. And that was kind of like what happened through 2015.
Gotcha. So Rogét, I want to ask you what that was like early on when you were being undercredited and how those sessions were like. What was that like? You were brought into a session. Were you kind of expecting anything, or is it just cool to be there, or what is that situation like early on when the undercrediting stage?
I think you kind of said both. It was unexpected and not a pleasant experience. However, there is something pleasant about it, which is, well, to go back to the actual story of it, we were in a few sessions that we were under the impression that we were just going to be working on somebody else's album. And it was a producer that we were working with. And basically we worked for about 2-3 weeks, just making insane stuff, just showing up, having fun, not thinking like, hey, this is going to be for so-and-so, or we're going to win Grammys. We just showed up and made music. There was no intention other than that. And I think something to keep in mind. That's the best way to approach any session and idea. But we were working.
So you didn't go in with a split sheet and be like, before I step in the door.
Oh no.
No, just kidding.
I really didn't know much. No, you're right.
Yeah.
I didn't know much about publishing.
Sure.
I didn't know really anything. All I knew was how to make good music, and that's kind of what I was pushing for. So we did these songs, and turns out later we went and signed kind of like a something we shouldn't have signed, but it was basically like saying, you can't get royalties. It's kind of like a buyout. And at the time I was just, I was like, oh, I guess this is how they do it, huh? So signed it, got paid a little bit, and thought I was on top of the world. Fast forward 2 years later, the records come out. There was 2 records that we did, and it was on a big album for a very big artist. And I was both surprised and also like confused, but it was really cool to hear myself on something so big. And it kind of gave me the confidence to say, hey, even though, because I checked the credits and I was like, wait, where are we? And, that sort of was the thing that really made me realize, hey, your music, your ideas, your sound is good enough to be a part of this. So now I have to do this right. And that's sort of where Greg came along. So it was just,
Well, so we have a lot of producers in ATA. There are many in here today, a lot of artists who may find themselves in those situations. What is your advice to them? Because I am assuming this practice is unfortunately pretty... it just happens a lot. Unfortunately, this is part of the industry. How do artists and producers protect themselves from that, and songwriters?
Well, I would say if it does happen, which for a lot of people who are getting into this and trying to go all the way, it will. It's almost a guarantee that it will, unfortunately. But don't let that discourage you. Don't let that stop you from the real big prize, the big picture. You read any big producer artist story, and they've got tons of them. And if it does happen, then maybe that's the sign, hey, I probably should get somebody to look over my stuff, and make sure you have a good manager who really understands what you do as a producer or a writer, and obviously a good lawyer to look over things, because people will put papers in front of you. People have walked in this middle of studio sessions and like put papers and been like, sign this, and then I'll call Greg and he'll say, you should leave, and or read that before, and
right.
It's the music industry, the arts in general, it's a very unexpected place. It's very Wild West, but it's also just try and take the good from it. If you're on a big record and you didn't get the credit, just know that you still did the work, and that's a sign that you could advance to the next level and get some guidance and get some management.
So do you think this is a right? Go for it.
Sorry, just to piggyback on that thought. I mean, the advice I always give to people when they ask me is like, if someone don't sign anything until you've had a lawyer look at it. And if someone's pressuring you to sign it, like, you can always be like, you know what, like, I'm sure this is going to be cool, but I don't know what these things say, because I just make the songs and I don't know the business. So I got to show this to my lawyer, and I'm sure we'll work it out and be fine. And but just like, take a stance of being naive and just say like, I got to have somebody look at this. I need an adult.
Right.
Like that. And usually, like, that is usually all the protection you need if you're like just getting started. I got to credit this phrase to Eben Taubenfeld, who's a great A&R guy. He said he told me like, hey, everyone pays the tax. Some way or another, you pay the tax on your way up. And the only thing you gotta like look after is that you don't pay it twice. That's so like, if you realize like, oh, this should have gone better the last time, just keep that in mind for the next time.
Yeah, because I would imagine, a lot of young producers, songwriters, they're given a shot. It's like they're invited into a studio that. Into a session that they're just honored to be there. They don't, and we know it's a lot about connections and relationships. And I would imagine you might, you don't want to upset this incredible connection. You don't want to upset this relationship or ruin the relationship, burn that bridge. So I could see a lot of, songwriters, producers just doing whatever they say. It's like, oh, you need me to sign this? For sure. No problem. Like, just kind of like being overtly agreeable, even though that's not in their best interest. So I mean, I love that recommendation of just pleading ignorance and just being naive and just be like, I'd love, absolutely, I gotta send it to my lawyer. Now, do you think, Rogét, had you known that early on, had you done that, they would have been like, oh yeah, no problem. It'd be like, yo, you got to sign this now or you can get out of here. We're not going to work with you.
I think it still would have been a problem in some way. I think no matter where you are in your career, you're always going to have some kind of roadblocks, whether it's other people arguing about percentages or who did what on a song. And that's when you really start to tell apart who are your friends, who do you trust, and who you should keep working with. Because people can get greedy, people can get selfish, people can get however. But I think it's just important to remain working and remain, in a good spot. But
Sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned percentages. I want to dig into that a little bit because there's a lot of confusion here. Now I see that, Rogét, you've been credited as a songwriter on some of the songs you've worked on. You've been credited as a producer on most of the releases in the last couple of years. You're both. Can you, either one of you, can you break down the distinction in the pop world and the hip hop world between songwriter and producer? It seems like those lines are awfully blurred these days.
I think that especially when you start an idea with somebody, a lot of what I do is mainly music based. So I make all of my loops and samples and everything that you hear from the records I've been a part of is actually me playing and doing my own things to it and putting it, running it through plugins, whatever. But I think that both songwriter and producer can be looked at in different ways. Of course, a lot of people will say a songwriter is somebody who sits in there and is actually writing the song and actually like writing lyrics and melody. And I think there's just so many components that make up a good song, and the production is one of them. The music, the drums, the lyrics, the melody. I think that everybody's contribution to that in some way, shape, or form is songwriting. And I think producing is really more than just making a beat and doing all that, there's a lot of great producers who make amazing beats, but I think that there's a bigger picture involved, which is overseeing the song, making sure it makes it to the finish line, providing a great space for the artist to work in, making sure it's mixed. And it's sort of a lot of different jobs, knowing who to get to finish the record. And a lot of times that stuff is kind of based on the relationship as well that the producers or songwriters have with each other. Some people will add a small thing on a record and like maybe put a little sprinkle or a little touch of something, and they'll get songwriting credit and publishing, but they won't be credited as a producer because of the contribution. Or sometimes someone will put in a sound that's tiny that like made the whole record go, and that could be considered production. So it kind of goes several different ways. But I think for me, starting a song, finishing a song, and seeing it all the way through is really what a producer's job is.
Is that when you're discussing credit and splits? At what stage of the process does that happen?
I would say it usually happens when we know there's something coming out. When we finish a song, and when you're in a room, you don't want to be like, so what do you guys think of 20% or 30%?
Right.
And I've been in rooms where people have said that, and I said, maybe we shouldn't talk about this right now. But because it can turn people off, it can make people think you're only in it for a certain reason. So if you have good management, if other people have good management and everyone knows each other, it's for the most part, people want to make music with their friends. So when you're working with good friends and you have that trust, you can know that for the most part, hey, everyone's if there's 4 people on the song, we all worked on it, we're going even 4 ways. And that's usually how I like to work, is just to do good business with people. But I would say when the song is done and they're like, hey, they're going to release this as the single, these are the proposed splits in my experience.
And how do you break that down when you're saying it's equal 4 ways? Is that equal songwriting, equal like publishing, and equal production credit?
I think Greg can probably break this part down.
Greg, break this down for us.
Sure. So, I mean, to look at it from my eyes, it's like there's 4 parts of a producer agreement. So when a label wants to put out a record, they're going to, want to get all the producers to sign producer agreements, if there's more than one producer. And that agreement's going to have these 4 elements. It's going to have what the producer's fee is. It's going to have what their royalty is, which, people call points. It's the recorded royalty, the master royalty. Then there's the publishing, which is the songwriting percentages. And then there's the credits. So, those are usually the 4 things that we're going to work out on any given record. For where like Rogét is in his career, it's a lot of repeat players, right? It's like working again with people that we've worked with for a long time, where we have really good relationships, where like we've already established, like, if this record is made this way, it's going to be split up this way. And like, a lot of those things just cruise through, where like somebody, like the artist puts forward a proposal, or I put forward a proposal, or the co-producer's manager puts forward a proposal, and everyone is just like, yeah, cool. That's how it goes, like a lot of the time. There's always some records that get Frankenstein together, where like it starts with one person, it goes to another person, goes to another person. Some of the contributions end up being really big. Some of the contributions end up being relatively smaller.
So like Sicko Mode, I would imagine, is one of those instances where there's like 327 songwriters on that. Is that the right count?
328.
Yeah.
That's it. Okay, right.
Yeah, but who's counting? So that in those cases, obviously it gets commensurately more complicated. But I think the one thing that like people got to keep in mind when you're in that situation is the number still, like on the publishing side, it still has to add up to 100, right? Like not everyone can get 50%. Not all 327 people can get 50%. And until it adds up to 100. No one's getting any royalties. So there's like, even with a record like that, where like the splits are, naturally going to be really complicated. Everyone has an incentive to get it to 100, which is that we all get paid when it gets there.
Gotcha. And let's talk producer points a little bit, because there's a lot of confusion with that. I mean, most of the artists, in ATA, and just a lot of the artists that are listening to the show right now are indie artists working with producers, and they read a lot about points, and they're like, well, I hear you're supposed to get between 3 to 5 points, but this is an indie release, so maybe I've heard you should get 20%. What, like, can you just break down the point system once and for all, so there's an understanding here about this?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously perhaps not obvious to all, but the points, which are the percentage of a master, each 1 point is 1% of the master. On a major label release, where the artist is getting usually 15 to 20% of the total points on the master, every 1 point that the producers are getting is 1 point out of the artist's royalty into the producer's royalty. So if the artist deal
is 20%, then and the producer is getting 5 points, and the artist is actually just going to make 15% on that record.
Exactly. So in that instance, I think you said 5 points. So in that case, like in effect, of all the royalties that are getting paid out on the song, in that instance, the artist is getting 75% of the royalties, and the producer is getting 25% of the royalties. Does that make sense? Because it's 5 out of 20.
Right. So if this was an indie deal, you would say, well, the producer should get 25% because there isn't a label taking out that amount. Is that kind of
right?
Yeah. Way to think about
exactly. So and I think like is pretty common. And again, like Rogét said, it's always a Wild West, and and every new deal invents a new music industry in some ways, but like a lot of times when like there's no producer fees being paid, and it's all of the compensation is going to be royalties based, usually the publishing and the master royalties are about the same. So it's like, 5 people worked on the song and on the record, like, they're going to split up the publishing 5 ways. They're going to split up the master 5 ways. Not always like that, but it's often like that when you're talking about independent artists who are self-releasing and not paying any producer fees.
Gotcha. So, how does it work now at the level that Rogét you're at, and is it more common to see, like, what are most of these sessions like? Is it more common that you're getting an upfront producer fee to do the session, or is it more common that you're just doing a session with an artist, and then if the record's going to come out, you just work out a back end and no one's getting any of that upfront fee?
I think sometimes people have not really upfront. Like there's no like, hey, you're going into this is what the fee is. It's kind of based on your credits, your experience. I think there's obviously producers who get paid more because they've done bigger records and they can guarantee a better outcome for the song. I think when you're starting out, just getting something for producing a song is exciting, and it's steadily grown for me, and over the years it's been cool to watch that. But sometimes there's a smaller artist, then you're really passionate about their music, and maybe their budget for a song is only like $1,000 or $2,000, and there's 2 producers in the song, and it really is up to you, because I've been asked, hey, do you want this? Do you want to do this? We can pass or not. And it's kind of like, for the most part, you want to give those records and artists a chance, because you never know what can happen. You still get, I would say, don't be turned off by a small fee. If it's a good artist, if it's a good song, just kind of, because if you're still going to get your points, you're still going to get your publishing, the song could blow up, and that fee was just nothing really in comparison to that. But usually it's something, if you're going in with a big artist, you kind of have an idea like, hey, this person probably has a bigger budget, but you never really know, because sometimes labels can limit that for projects, and saying, hey, we only have this much left. And but in the case of being proposed things up front, there have been things that needed to be finished before that said, hey, this is what we can offer you to finish the song or to do this and that. So it really varies.
What do you mean by finishing? What does that mean when you've got to finish a song?
Sometimes people will have a song that basically sounds done, like the song itself is done, like the hook, the verse, all that, the vocals, but maybe there's musical elements missing that they feel could elevate the song more or take it to the next level, or maybe they want to do a bridge or a key change or something. And I think for me, finishing a song is just, it's what it takes to get it from here to here, knowing, okay, now I believe in the song. Now I believe it's done, and it can go out on the radio or on DSPs or whatever. But that's kind of what I would consider.
Okay.
Finishing touches.
Sure. Greg, is there anything you want to add to kind of that breakdown? And I'm also curious, like, when, just to get back to that splits thing, you were mentioning, so let's say there's 5 points dedicated for the producer. Sometimes a song might have 5, 6, 7 producers on it. Do they all split those 5 points that are allocated for producers, or are they each working out their own point percentage with the label?
Yeah, so it really does depend from record to record and how things came together, and and all that, because obviously, like, when you have a lot of producers on a record, a lot of times, like, 1 or 2 or 3 did like the lion's share of the work, and then it got passed around to some other people to finish, to add a little bit to, we want the drums to hit a little bit harder, like, could you try to change up the drums, like, stuff like that. And then, like, so there's still going to be like that limited number of points available on the record, because at some point, like, the artist will say, like, this is my record as the artist, like, I can't give away all the royalties when it's my name on this project and my fans that are listening to it. So there's still going to be like a finite place to stop, no matter how many producers there are. If it took a lot of people to make the record, you can count on the points getting split up into smaller amounts. Like, it's just as simple as that.
Gotcha.
And, like, points don't also have to be apportioned as a whole point. And, like, sometimes you see somebody getting a half a point or a third of a point or whatever, like just based on how many people there are on the song, the nature of their contribution. Like you got in a room with 3 of your buddies and the 3 of you together did a really small addition to the production. Like the 3 of you together are going to get 1 point that you're going to split up amongst yourselves in the way that you think is fair internally amongst the 3 of you. So,
gotcha.
Or you might get half a point that you're going to split up amongst the 3 of you.
Yeah. So let's talk publishing a little bit. Rogét, you're with Kobalt, is that right?
Yes.
And have you always been with Kobalt, or is this something that you moved to?
Kobalt was the first and only publisher I've had. So
now they have an interesting model where they don't own your copyrights necessarily. They're just taking kind of a commission. Can you break down the deal that you have? Now, was this something that Greg arranged, or were you with Kobalt before Greg, or how did that relationship start?
Well, sort of in the beginning of sorting through who's going to be my publisher and figuring that out, we were going back and forth with just different publishers and seeing what they could offer. So I think knowing that I had some big songs on the way and already out, that I wanted to go the admin route, which is for administration. So, which is what Kobalt does. And I just figured learning about a lot of the kinds of deals that other people had and how, a publishing deal can be great, especially depending on the connections and the A&R that you have. Sure. But they could also take more. It's all different, everyone has different modifications and it's customized to everyone's own situation. But I just decided that I wanted to retain as much as I can on that end. And at the same time, they've also been just an incredible publisher and have put me in a lot of great sessions. They help keep the connection strong. They have a great sync team. They're like family to me. So I don't just have one person there. I have a lot of different point people, which is kind of not uncommon, but most people just have like, hey, this is my guy at my publishing company. But it's nice to have that feeling. And sort of when I was doing the meetings and meeting people, I really felt a great, warm, sort of welcoming vibe from them, and kind of just made me feel like I already knew them for a while. And I think that's something very important to consider. If anyone out there finds themselves in that position of, hey, I've got options to go to different places, go to the place where you will have people that will pick up your phone calls, that will answer your questions, that will do everything they can to put you in the room or as close as they can into the room. For instance, there's a lot of big artists that I wanted to get in with, and I kind of shot my wish list in the beginning, and they were like, well, we can't get you in directly with this person because some artists are just super closed off, no matter how crazy of a publisher you have or whatever. So they'll they put me in with a lot of producers who are close with that specific artist. And sometimes that is a great link. But for the most part, they have really, I would say, grown a lot and really excelled as publishers and in their connections for me.
What were some of the decisions early on? So you felt this warm vibe from them, which is awesome, but when it comes down, it's about your business, and I'm assuming some of these major publishers were probably throwing a lot of money at you or promising the world or who knows. What did it really come down to, other than the warm fuzzy feeling you were feeling when walking in those offices?
There was a lot of different things to consider. Do I want a lot of money? Do I want good connections? Do I want a ton of money? Do I want a little bit of money? So I think for me, it was really knowing the fact that most of the sessions that I have been getting and had been getting at the time were through my friends, were through connections, were through producers that really liked me. So in a way, as Greg says, no one's really a better A&R than yourself when you're connected like that. So I really took that into consideration, knowing that Kobalt is really great at letting me do my thing and sort of letting me connect myself with a lot of people because they know that I'm pretty plugged, and it's been growing more and more
Mm-hmm.
every year. But also, they are great publishers and they do have great connections. So the combination of both is good. But I think that was something to consider, just knowing that I was, most of my favorite stuff that I was doing, I was kind of getting on my own. So
Yeah.
I took that into consideration.
Cool. Yeah. We have a lot of songwriters listening to this, young songwriter producers who are thinking about, how to seek out a publishing deal, what kind of publishing deal they should look at, what publishing companies they should. Can you help people understand and think about, or just maybe give your pointers on what these younger songwriters should be thinking about when going into these meetings and what kind of publisher you should look for?
Well, it's definitely a decision that you don't want to rush.
Okay.
No matter how exciting or tempting it may be to just sign a paper and get paid and do that, because I know a lot of people who have made the mistake of, or I've heard stories as well of people who've just made the mistake of signing something and they didn't read through the terms, and read it over 100 times with your lawyer, with your manager. Make sure that, let's say you found the one you want to go over it and find a way for your lawyer or manager to kind of easily summarize what these things mean, because they're long forms. There's a lot that goes into any kind of contract, but especially with a publishing deal, it can be pretty hefty. So I would say make sure that you feel like you're joining a family, like you're joining a really somebody you trust. And I think also something to consider is sometimes a publishing deal isn't for everyone, even if you're getting offers. If you know that you have some more songs on the way that haven't come out yet, that's something to consider as well. So, if you worked on some stuff for a big artist and it's like, hey, this will be out in like 4 or 5 months, but you're getting a deal offer saying, hey, we want to sign, we want to do this. They know you have it coming out. You want to kind of find the line between like not making those people wait too long, because sometimes people lose interest. But the truth is, if you're good at what you do and you're making good records, people are always going to be interested in working together. And I think make sure the timing is right. Make sure you have, another really important thing to consider, make sure you have enough on these songs that will kind of assure you that you'll be able to recoup the deal. And it's all sort of based on what you do. But if you have a lot of money coming in, I would say don't take a huge, massive deal that you have to take many years to pay back, that could even exceed the term period, which is usually, it could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, depending on what you sign.
I mean, don't take that big advance because, or as big of an advance with less, with a smaller cut from your publisher,
right?
Because you might never recoup that.
You could have a few small songs, or even if you have a hit song, you want to be smart and you want to make sure. Obviously, it's a tough place, because it's in the beginning of this process. It is kind of hard to make money, and it's only because it takes so long. The songs and the labels and everything goes through such a long process. Paperwork can take a while too, depending on how speedy lawyers are at getting back to each other. Sure. And they're also probably backed up with hundreds of other deals that have been in the works and are being disputed and argued over and whatnot. So it all sort of depends, though. If you have a good plan and you want to take a big advance, make sure you invest it. Make sure you set some aside for your taxes, because the number is not always what it's going to say after April, the month of April comes. But right. I think it's just, it's good to have a plan. And for the most part, a lot of the first advances and producer fees that I was paid, I put it all right back into my craft. I bought all the synths that I needed. I bought all the equipment. I upgraded things. So you kind of are constantly finding yourself putting the money back and making more. And it's all a cycle like that.
Okay, cool. Right on. Good advice.
Sure.
I want to take some questions here while we're waiting for Greg to get back in. His computer died, I guess. And so he, all right. So we have Ibby VK. I believe he's coming to us from Dubai, but I'm going to bring him in. And where are you coming to us from? Are you in? Dubai?
Yeah, I'm in Dubai. It's 3:24 a.m. right now.
Oh my gosh! Thank you for staying up.
Thank you guys for doing this. So you're the real heroes here. So yeah, Rogét, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So obviously, besides being a very successful producer, you're also an amazing songwriter. I heard your song with like the songs that came out, especially recently. I think with Kehlani.
Yes.
That was a pretty good project. I just wanted to ask, like the whole reason I started my career as an artist was because I initially wanted to, and I still want this. Like this is my main dream, is to be a songwriter, not as an artist. Right now, because of the courses we take with Ari and everything, I just recently hit 1 million streams on Spotify.
Congrats! It's a big achievement.
Instagram is growing, Spotify is growing, and everything, and I'm gigging almost everywhere. Well, I was before.
Right,
Corona.
right.
But yeah, I still really want to be a songwriter. This is why I started everything. So I just wanted to ask you, how can someone like me, like I'm this Armenian Syrian guy living in Dubai. So
my dad's from Syria too.
Oh, nice. We're from Syria.
Yeah, nice.
Damascus, is it?
Yeah, he's from Damascus. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm from Latakia, which is like across the.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, like I'm someone who's obviously non-US based and a non-US citizen, so it's pretty hard. So what would you recommend, even for other people in the course? Like, how can we get a foot in the door? Say.
Well, that's a good question actually, and I think that the most important thing is to be writing the songs, to be working constantly, to be constantly improving your craft, and don't stop doing that, just because you live in a different part of the world. There's plenty of songwriters and people who live in sort of more remote parts or more, everyone says you got to go to LA, you got to go to New York, or you got to go wherever. And it's not necessarily true. There's huge songwriting communities everywhere. You just sort of have to find them and find the friends and the people in your community and in the songwriting communities out there, which, I'm sure they're not as big as in the US, but there's music going on everywhere. But I think especially for what you're trying to do, I think if you put out good stuff as an artist and you put out a lot of music like that and it's getting good traction, people will contact you. People will try and reach out to producers or people who, for instance, they're looking for a song to get top line, or they're looking for, hey, I have a beat and I want, things like that are good ways to kind of try and get involved with just the songwriting community, and that's sort of worldwide, because there's a lot of people who get discovered on we're getting discovered on SoundCloud, but now especially like Instagram, people will post a clip of them doing an original song and saying, hey, you never know who's watching, you never know if a great A&R or a great person in the business is watching and saying, hey, this guy's really good, and maybe they'll want to fly you out, or maybe they'll fly out to you and whatever it is. But just don't stop writing the songs, and definitely it helps to have frequent collaborators, whether it's somebody online who is a great producer could be from Europe, could be from LA, could be from Australia, anywhere, and saying, because there's actually even a lot of groups and artist groups that have like 3 different members in different parts of the world, and they all just send each other ideas. The power of the email, the power of social media. I think just knowing that you're in a place that inspires you and an environment that is good for you to keep sort of honing your craft. So I would say, to break it down, keep writing good songs, keep finding people to collaborate with, and send your music out, and just keep doing what you're doing, and the right people will find you. And of course, when it's obviously safer to travel and things are better in the world, I'm sure taking a trip somewhere or meeting up with somebody who you've collaborate with in person, that'll be a different feeling for sure. But I would say those are some good things to consider.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you, Rogét.
Thank you so much. And Yeah, so obviously through Spotify, I'm focusing on Spotify, of course, because of the course with Ari. That's what he's teaching us.
Sure.
So eventually that will happen probably. But how do I reach out to industry professionals and producers like such as yourself? Like, would you accept someone to send you a song, for example? Like, if I DM you on Instagram, I just followed you, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Like, if someone DMs you on Instagram or something, or like emails you a song, would you even consider it? Or like, how does that work?
Definitely. I mean, people reach out and try to send me stuff all the time. I think it's just based on how you're feeling about what you see. But yeah, I'm totally open to it. And I would say my suggestion would be just send it out. Just hit send on that thing. And you know, you might not get a response back. You might not get a response back at all. You might get a response back in like 5 minutes, or maybe like 3 months later, someone was like, yo, I just saw this. You're amazing. You never know. So I would say if you have a favorite producer or a favorite songwriter or whatever, send your stuff, and or you know, a lot of people do covers of songs and tag people, and they kind of like, oh, you're really good. So I think just any way that is sort of, you know, not overdoing it, but just shoot your shot and see what happens. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you. We have a question from Christina. I'm going to bring Christina in here. Let's see where. Hey, Christina, how you doing?
So I'm a pop singer songwriter. I'm an independent artist. And I was just curious, like when you're looking to work with a new producer, whether it's maybe a somewhat established producer or just trying to work with different people, what are some things that what are some points that we should include in a pitch to a producer's manager?
Greg, you want to?
Sure. I mean, I think, you know, whatever you have going for you is a good thing to include. Right? Whatever makes you stand out, whatever differentiates you, whatever your proudest accomplishments are, those are the things to include. And like, you know, just like Rogét said, like you shoot your shot, and sometimes it's meant to be, and sometimes it isn't. But I think when you're trying to develop those like initial producer relationships to grow your career, you kind of have to go where the love is anyway. Like you can't like beat yourself up that like, oh, so and so isn't interested in me or doesn't respond to me. You kind of have to be like, the people who do respond to me, those are my people. Those are going to be my people, because those are the people who fuck with me. And just kind of like embrace them and grow with them.
Cool. Sweet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. Cool. We have Juan here. I'm going to bring Juan in.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I have a quick question. I guess on the technical side of the productions things is, so I'm a songwriter, I'm an artist, and I produce a lot of my stuff. Sometimes I go out to other producers, but it's you know, it's like I have my own sounds, you know, kind of think a lot of artists are kind of like nitpicky all the time about that stuff. So I'm trying to make my stuff. And I don't know if this is kind of a silly question, but like one thing is I get bogged down should I just reach out to more producers? Because I feel like I go at a really slow pace. Like, you know, I got to make my songs, I got to produce the songs, and I'm putting in a lot of hours, but I know other artists where they have it like a streamline. Like I know artists in my local area where like they have a producer, they have engineers, they have like everybody. It's just like they walk in, do this, and they're done. And so one thing I was thinking about was like maybe making my tracks and kind of mixing. I'm sure like, you know, you can mix, but you probably also at the same time work with engineers.
Yeah.
And so I'm just thinking like, should I don't know if this is kind of a more weird technical question to ask, but it's just, do you think that might be better, like to start to like sort of offload the process? Because I just feel, and maybe I got to work on all this other stuff, which I'm working on. Like, I feel like it just takes a while for me to do everything.
I think it's a good question. I think it sort of depends on what sound you're going for. A lot of artists feel more comfortable producing for themselves or making their own songs because that's just their process. And it could take longer, but if that's what the better outcome is, hey, you know, you don't want to focus on the speed of how you do things, you know?
Yeah.
I think it's important to say if it takes you 2 or 3 months to make a good song and that's just your process, and then look, your song comes out and you end up getting a few million streams on your own, then maybe take note of that and say, okay, cool. But I think it's good to work with other people. It's good to get other producers' opinion and different flavor in your music. So I think kind of like the last few questions, it's best to do it with friends. It's best to find a person who you know well, or one of your friends that makes beats, for instance, you know, and just hit them up and say, hey, send me some beats and send me some ideas, send me a track or whatever it is. Or you can even speed up the process and do some of it on your own. Ask somebody to send you a loop or a sample, or like just like an instrumental of them playing something. If like maybe playing, do you play an instrument?
I'm actually a pretty good guitar player, and that's kind of how also I've been able to sort of, because I think one of the reasons why I should collaborate is so that way I can build those connections. I think
it's one thing I think you should do is definitely, if you haven't already done it, just write the song on guitar and don't focus on the production. Make it a good song and send that to a producer. And then you make, let's say you make 5 great songs on the guitar and you just need doper production on it. You can send the track of you playing your vocals and then your guitar, send that to a good producer and say, hey, can you make this kind of vibe? Or can you make this a more trap vibe or a more pop vibe or a more whatever alternative? And I think that's cool, because in a way you're still making your own music. You're still like contributing musically to your songs, aside from just writing a song. So that's one way to do it. Because even for me, I don't like really working by myself. I love, because my forte is really on the keyboards and on the synths and sound design. So for me, I love pairing up with somebody who does really good drum programming and crazy drums. And like, it speeds up the process. It makes it more fun. And I think that's sort of what people are on. But if you have something special and you're like, I don't want anyone to touch this is my baby, then work on it for however long it takes, and don't be discouraged by taking a long time, because over time you're going to improve and you're going to be able to write and produce and do all that much faster. But establish the connection with some good producers, find someone who's good at mixing or trying to get good at mixing. You know, it doesn't have to be like the dopest mixer or producer in the world. The people that are up and coming, you never know, they could be the next, you know, Timbaland or Max Martin or whatever. You just never know. So I think just work with the people that you believe in and work with the people who believe in you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, definitely. Thank you so much, guys.
No problem.
So actually, I mean, that's really great advice. And I want to just kind of touch on that. I had Zaytoven on the show a little bit ago, and he was talking about how early on, you know, him and Gucci Mane, they started as friends. And that's the thing. It's like, I can't stress that enough from what Rogét is saying is, it's, you just work with your friends and then you kind of grow together. And that's kind of the thing that I think a lot of young artists, we're so in such a rush and hurry to get things going, and you want to work with the biggest and the best of the best and the biggest of the biggest right now, when it's just like, but everybody starts somewhere. Everyone starts at zero, and then you kind of climb and grow from there. And so I think that's really great advice. Rogét said it's just, start with your friends. Yeah. So I'm gonna wrap it up, and I have one final question for both of you guys that I ask everybody who comes on the show. What does it mean to you to make it in the new music business? Rogét, let's start with you, and then I'll get to Greg.
I think it's knowing that you can put out the highest quality stuff, and also combine that with having a good reputation and being able to work with anybody. I think that it doesn't matter how many records you sell or how famous you are or how big your songs are. Be a good person. And I think having everyone love you, and also working, and there's also a lot of people who aren't going to love you. And that's just because they're haters, or because they just they're jealous or whatever it is. But you're going to have plenty of that. Everyone will, whether you make it big or not. It's just, I think knowing that you're able to put out these big songs, you're able to complete an artist's vision, and just knowing that you have obtained the skills to do that. I think that's really what makes me feel like, I made it, or however you want to say, is I feel comfortable knowing that I can walk into any room with any artist and that's when you really feel like, hey, like I'm doing this right, because it's not about only doing one genre or working with one person. It's you've realized your role and you do it to the best of your ability, and you also are, you know, you're proving that when you work with an artist and your track record gets better, something comes out. And obviously, you know, you scroll past your credits and you look at it and you say cool, but never get too comfortable just because you have a few big songs. Always be pushing, always be a student, and always be willing to learn and accept that you may not always be right, but you will continue to push on and try to keep changing production and songwriting and pushing it to the next level.
I love it. Awesome, Rogét. Thank you.
Short
Greg, same question. What does it mean to you to make it in the new music business?
You know what, in the end, like whatever level of success you have, like you have to wake up in the morning and be happy with yourself and excited about your work for the day and excited about the people you're going to work with and like having fun, because like, you know, as I've learned being on this journey with Rogét and also being on my own career journey, you know, that started before that, like, you know, you hit these milestones where you're like, wow, that sold. Oh, wow, that hit #1. That went platinum. That went #1 on the radio. Like, you know, I did this big deal. I did this big deal that's 10 times bigger than the last big deal that I thought was going to be the biggest deal I ever did, right? Like, you know, all those things, like they happen like in the amount of time that they take to happen. But all along the way, you know, you still live in your own body and your own head with your friends and your family and the people that you work with one-on-one and that you look in the face every day. And, you know, you have to still be able to wake up in the morning, be happy, be excited, be inspired. And like, as long as you keep that feeling going, I think you're a winner.
I love it. Awesome. Rogét, Greg, thank you guys so much for coming on the show, answering questions and taking the time out of your day to do this. Everyone really appreciates that. And we'll have a wonderful rest of your day and night. And thanks for tuning in wherever you're coming to us from. And
thanks, Ari.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ari. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. See ya.